New Zealand's return to South Africa is about to bring something back to international rugby that has been missing for almost 3 decades, a proper touring experience. When the All Blacks arrive in Cape Town on the 7th of August, they will not simply be preparing for another test series against the Springboks. They will begin an 8-match journey across 6 weeks, featuring 4 provincial games followed by 4 tests. It is a schedule that looks back to an older era of rugby, while at the same time being managed with all the planning and professionalism of the modern game. Siya Kolisi has described this as the kind of tour his generation mostly heard about rather than experienced. That perfectly explains why this journey has created so much interest. For decades, international rugby has increasingly been built around short test windows and structured competitions. Teams fly into another country, play a match, and quickly move on. This tour is different. The All Blacks will spend weeks in South Africa, traveling between cities, facing provincial opposition and gradually building toward the biggest matches against the Springboks. The last proper New Zealand tour of South Africa came in 1996, and that tour remains one of the most important chapters in the history of this rivalry. John Hart's All Blacks travelled with 36 players and eventually won the series 2-1. It remains the only series victory by an All Blacks team on South African soil. That achievement carried enormous emotional weight because New Zealand had toured South Africa several times before, including in 1928, 1949, 1960, 1970 and 1976, without winning a series. The 1996 victory finally closed a historic chapter. Former All Blacks captain Sean Fitzpatrick has recalled how close the series was and how significant the victory became. The emotional connection was even stronger when the team returned home and encountered Don Clark, the legendary All Blacks fullback who had experienced disappointment on the 1960 tour. The memories of that 1996 team eventually helped create the reputation of the Incomparables, and now that history is being brought back into the spotlight. But this new tour will not simply attempt to recreate 1996. The professional game has changed dramatically. New Zealand will travel with a much larger squad, and the demands on modern players are very different. The All Blacks have already dealt with injuries to players including Tamati Williams, Scott Barrett and Lester Fainga'anuku, making squad depth even more important. Head coach Dave Rennie therefore faces an enormous management challenge. The All Blacks have planned their matchday squads well in advance because the travel schedule is so demanding. The wider group has also been split across different travel routes, with players and staff traveling through places including Singapore, Hong Kong and Perth. Some members of the squad traveled earlier, while others remained behind for additional preparation. Then there is Ardie Savea, who is joining the group later after being given additional rest. His workload over the previous period has been significant, and with 8 matches inside 6 weeks, managing experienced players could become just as important as selecting them. The tour begins in Cape Town against the Stormers. From there, the All Blacks travel to Durban to face the Sharks, then move to Pretoria for the Bulls, before meeting the Lions at Ellis Park. Only after those 4 provincial matches will the focus move completely toward the Springboks. These games are not simply exhibitions. The Stormers, Sharks, Bulls and Lions are serious professional teams, and each match will provide the All Blacks with a different challenge. The players will experience different stadiums, different conditions and different styles of South African rugby. For the supporters, these matches are equally significant. Durban and Pretoria, in particular, will have the rare opportunity to watch the All Blacks play a provincial side. For an entire generation, that experience has been almost impossible to imagine because traditional international tours largely disappeared from the professional calendar. South Africa is also taking these fixtures seriously. Rassie Erasmus has released several players to represent their provincial teams, including Evan Roos and Andre Hugo Venter with the Stormers, Jocko Williams with the Sharks and Ambrose Papier with the Bulls. Their involvement gives these matches another layer of importance because the players will have the chance to test themselves directly against the All Blacks. For New Zealand, the provincial games could become a valuable learning experience. They will reveal which players adapt quickly to South African conditions, how combinations perform under pressure and how the squad responds to repeated travel. They may also help the coaching staff understand exactly how much physical energy the players are using before the test series begins. That is one of the biggest differences between a normal test window and a traditional tour. A test match is one event. A tour becomes a season within a season. The Rugby Championship has effectively made room for this tour, with the competition returning in its normal form in the following years before another traditional tour is planned for 2030, when the Springboks are expected to make the reciprocal journey to New Zealand. That means this is not necessarily just a one-time experiment. It could represent the beginning of a new cycle between two of rugby's greatest nations. The tactical challenge will also be enormous. New Zealand knows exactly what South Africa can bring. Under Rassie Erasmus, the Springboks have developed a powerful and highly organized style based on physicality, set-piece strength, territorial pressure, defensive intensity, and impact from the bench. Kieran Reid has already highlighted the importance of matching the Springboks' proven formula. For the All Blacks, that does not necessarily mean copying South Africa. It means understanding what is required to win in South African conditions. Territory will matter. Set pieces will matter. Discipline will matter. Goal kicking will matter. The ability to handle pressure in the final stages of matches will matter. And after weeks of travel, the smallest mistakes could become even more costly. The physical demands will increase further when the teams reach the Highveld. Johannesburg and Pretoria offer different conditions from Cape Town, and altitude can become another factor when players are already carrying heavy workloads. This is why the All Blacks cannot simply treat every match in the same way. Some players will need rest. Others will receive opportunities. Some may become more important because of injuries. The coaching staff will have to maintain a balance between winning each match and protecting the squad for the tests. South Africa faces a similar challenge. Rassie Erasmus must manage his players carefully while dealing with provincial commitments, international preparation, and travel. The depth of both squads could ultimately become one of the most important factors in the entire tour. And then comes Baltimore. After the South African leg, the All Blacks and Springboks will meet at M&T Bank Stadium on the 12th of September. It will be the first meeting between the two nations on American soil, taking the tour into a completely different environment. That final test represents the modern side of the story. Traditional rugby tours were shaped by geography and travel. Modern rugby is increasingly global, commercial, and focused on expanding into new markets. Baltimore offers an opportunity to introduce the rivalry to supporters who may never have watched either team live. It also shows that this tour is not a simple recreation of the past. The opening matches are designed to revive an old tradition, but the final destination represents the future of rugby. By the time the teams reach Baltimore, they will have spent weeks together, traveled thousands of kilometers, played provincial matches, and contested major tests. The players will be physically tested, mentally challenged, and pushed outside the comfort of a normal international window. That is what makes this tour so fascinating. It is not simply New Zealand versus South Africa. It is the old touring game meeting modern professional rugby. It is history meeting new technology and preparation. It is provincial rugby meeting international rugby. And it is one of the greatest rivalries in sport being given an opportunity to breathe across an entire 6-week journey. For Siya Kolisi, it is the type of experience his generation rarely had. For Sean Fitzpatrick, it brings back memories of the historic 1996 campaign. For Dave Rennie, it is one of the toughest management challenges of his coaching career. For Rassie Erasmus, it is an opportunity to make South Africa's home advantage count throughout an extraordinary schedule. And for the supporters, it is perhaps something even more important. It is the return of the proper rugby tour. Cape Town will host the opening chapter. Durban will follow. Pretoria will provide another test. Johannesburg will bring the intensity of the Springbok environment. And finally, the rivalry will cross the Atlantic to Baltimore. Every match will tell part of the story. The final score of the test series will ultimately determine who has the bragging rights, but the importance of this tour goes beyond the scoreboard. It will test whether the traditional touring concept can still work in the professional era. The 1996 All Blacks traveled with 36 players and returned home as the Incomparables. The modern All Blacks will arrive with a larger squad, advanced preparation, and a carefully designed support structure. The world around them is completely different. But the fundamental challenge remains the same. Travel far from home. Adapt quickly. Handle the pressure. Win the next match. Then do it again. And again. That is the true test of a touring side. After 30 years, New Zealand is finally going back to South Africa for a tour that feels both historic and completely modern. The All Blacks are not simply traveling to play the Springboks. They are traveling to experience South African rugby in a way that no New Zealand team has done properly since 1996. And when the journey finally reaches Baltimore on the 12th of September, the rugby world will have its answer to one fascinating question. Can the traditional tour still produce something special in the professional era? Whatever happens on the field, one thing is already certain. New Zealand is going back to South Africa. Not simply for a test series. Not simply for a few matches. But for a tour. And after 3 decades, that alone makes this one of the most fascinating chapters yet in the extraordinary story of the All Blacks and Springboks.